Hi Facebook family, welcome back to another series with me. So I'm on my phone this time. Hopefully my audio is a lot better. Obviously everybody else is gonna see this video too, so hello to my YouTube family, hello to my Instagram family, because all those platforms are gonna be seeing this video. And before I even begin, I wanna shout out, hey Shay, big shout out to my patrons. My patrons, I started a Patreon for Shakti TV, which is my YouTube channel, and all of these videos are part of that channel as well. They go into a playlist on that channel called Metaphysical Musings. And so my patrons, those that have signed up to be a patron of mine through Patreon, really allow me to spend the time doing the research, compiling information, and bringing these videos live, as well as my fireside chats. And then they also get perks and bonuses. So the last two tiers of my patrons, they get access to behind the scene full moon and new moon events. So from now on, my full moon and new moon events will not be live. They will be pre-recorded and uploaded on a certain date so that I can add some graphics to it and give you guys a little bit of a cooler experience. But what is really cool is that my top two tier patrons will then have a behind the scenes where I will be live with them and I will be doing independent card pulls for them and channelings for them. So that's a really amazing perk to being a patron. So again, thank you so much. So many of you guys have already jumped on the Patreon bandwagon, and it's just, I appreciate it so much. I'll put a link for that in here afterwards. The first time seeing my face, hi, my name is Shakti. Welcome to my profile, my video. I have been teaching metaphysics for a long time, and I'm also currently teaching about alternate news in current events and things that we should be paying attention to, alternate timelines that are happening at the same time versus what the mainstream is communicating to you guys. And I also talk, of course, a lot about health, a lot about fitness. You'll see me talk about that all the time. Those are all huge passions of mine as well. So in this video series, we are talking about the Indigo children. Hi Jillian, hi Jenny. And why the Indigo children are important. So there are certain generations of energetics that come into this world. You've probably heard of crystal children and rainbow children and indigo children. These are pretty common, I would feel like, pop culture terms. But what really are they and why do they matter? And every generation has very specific benefits, okay? Every generation has specific benefits. Every generation has a thing they bring to the earth that really matters. So in this case, this video is about the Indigo children, because the Indigo kids are the front and center line of information right now during the Great Awakening, okay? And I'm gonna go like what qualifies an Indigo child. I have this on the board behind me, how you know if you are one, and why they are so important. So why they are so important, the crystalline children are very sensitive. They are not the ones on the front line of information for what's happening right now. They are anchoring the energy on the planet. They're typically, so the crystalline generation is said to have arrived from the 2000s and onward, but there's really no cutoff date for when you come to the planet as what kind of like energetic being. But the crystalline children are not the ones disseminating information. They're not the ones that are like on the front lines, like trying to wake people up. They are generally too sensitive for that, and they are sort of in the behind the scenes doing the energetic work, the grid mapping, that kind of stuff, okay? So if you're someone and you find yourself really overwhelmed by the news and really overwhelmed by current events, and you're just trying to like do your grids and send your Reiki and trying to like just do the energetic stuff without being too physically involved, then you're probably a crystalline child, and that's what you're supposed to be doing in this wave. But if you are like me and you find yourself with this incredible urge to speak truth and wake people up and give them information in a way that you think is digestible and honorable, then you're probably an Indigo child, and I'm going to explain why. Now, one of the things you'll notice when you come onto my profile is every day I have something that's called the Threaducation, right? It's a thread for education. And underneath that thread, you can find all kinds of articles and links that I share and other people share that have to do with current events. And the reason I did it that way versus putting everything on my profile is because I really wanted to establish sort of digital consent. okay? And what I mean by digital consent, that's a term that I am coining right now, is that you have the ability to expand that thread and read the links if you want to. You don't have to be assaulted with all of these articles and all these things that are just being shown to you in your news feed. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to cause alarm. Hi Ashley, hi Sarah, to my public. I didn't want to just bombard their pages with information. I wanted them to know that they could rely on my profile to come and learn something new every day if they wanted to and if they were available to. So it's a form of consent that I'm practicing. And so today, the conversation about being an indigo child is, I'll share a little bit of a story with you about how I first knew about, or my first hint really should have been about being an indigo child and why that wasn't so important to me. But I'll go through some traits of what an indigo child is, and you can tell me if you relate to the indigo child inclinations. And so I watched a few videos and I researched from a couple people like what they thought an indigo child would be. And it was very similar to what I deduced as being an indigo child's personality or characteristics. So let's dive into that. Okay, so the first one is, it's backwards, rebellious, okay? Indigo children are naturally rebellious. We grew up being rebels. We probably listened to rock and roll and punk and everything opposite to what our generation was listening to, whatever that was. We went counterculture all the time and often. We did not join systems easily. So what I mean by that is, in my own life, I rejected the church at a very young age. I do not do gurus. I'm not a guru person. I like to learn from people and I really admire the people that I learn from, but I don't get absorbed in like a guru. I don't get absorbed into systems easily. I don't get absorbed into movements easily. I always maintain my distance and I like to make decisions for myself. That's a big characteristic of indigo children, is that they're rebellious and they don't want to be swept up into something without their own discernment, their own ability to make that decision, okay? So if you're someone who wasn't very rebellious growing up or even now, then this is probably not you. It doesn't describe you, but by far and large, indigo children tend to be the rebels of their generation, the rebels of their crew. Hi Mariah, hi Kari, Kobe. Okay, so the second one is they're extremely highly intelligent. These are people who love to learn. They love to read. They're very self-educated. They're very cerebral and very articulate. So they are people who like to communicate, and they communicate very, very well. And a lot of what they've learned has been completely self-taught, and a lot of them do have higher education just because that was the format that was laid before them. But even after the formal education, it was all self-motivated and self-driven. The key here being very, very cerebral. There's something about the indigo children that their brain just functions differently. They make connections faster. It's a different way of the brain operating. Sometimes these kids will also be classified as weirdos because they are also very neurodivergent. Their brain doesn't work in like a normal timeline or normal map, so they get distracted by boring things. They don't have the attention span to focus on the things that other people are necessarily teaching them. They want to focus on what they want to focus on. And when they do find something that really interests them, their attention is very expansive and they tend to be brilliant at that particular thing. The third characteristic is they're very stubborn, often to their own detriment. These are individuals, myself, who to their own detriment, meaning even when someone has good advice for them, even if they're like, hey, if you do this, it might be easier, I tend to be like, no, fuck you, I'll do it my own way. And that's not good. That's something I'm learning to work with. But most indigo children tend to have that quality about them. They're super, super stubborn and they want to figure it out their own way. And someone that's like that is my son. My son is very much an indigo child. He has every single characteristic of this. It's so fascinating to me to watch him be very stubborn, even when we're offering him an easier way, even when we're offering him options. He's like, no, I want to do this way. And then he'll like slam his head against the wall and he'll be like, that was super rough. And then he'll be like, oh, okay, fine. Maybe I'll try it that other way. That's a typical characteristic personality of the indigo child. Okay, fourth one is they tend to be very spiritually attuned, highly psychic. They see through the bullshit. They see through people telling lies. They see through things that don't make sense. This is why lots of indigo people are conspiracy theorists. Why? Because they can see the threads that are being outside the mainstream narrative. They catch onto those threads real quickly and they're like, okay, something's not making sense. And they figure things out that are behind the veil of what they're being shown. Okay, so again, I have been doing psychic work for a long time. I'm extremely intuitive. The term indigo specifically relates to the third eye chakra. That is the color of that chakra. So this is like a primary tool with which we operate in the world, the pineal gland. It's 100% true. That's very accurate. Most indigos actually tend to be very, very similar in that characteristic as well. And the last thing is they have a strong sense of purpose. They feel like they were put on the planet for a reason and with a mission, and they will fulfill that even if they have no idea what that is. They will spend the rest of their life figuring that out. It is like this assignment from God. They feel it in their bodies, and even when they don't have direction or know what it is, they are gun-ho gonna figure it out. Okay? So again, the 5 characteristics, they're rebellious, highly intelligent, very stubborn, very spiritual, have a sense of purpose, okay? So part of this very spiritually attuned is also being HSP, a highly sensitive person, okay? That characteristic of being a highly sensitive person where they feel everything just a little bit too much and they sense things a little bit too much, also very typical of the indigo child. What distinguishes them from the crystalline children, again, is the fact that they are rebellious and they are not just highly intelligent, because the crystalline children are, but they're very vocal about it. Whereas the crystalline children don't feel the need to be as vocal, okay? That's the difference, okay? So let me give you a little story time, of how this shows up in my own life. And I want you to think about, as I'm sharing this story, where in your own life is there a model for that kind of rebellion, for that kind of like speaking out against something you know is wrong, okay? When I was in high school, I was part of the LGBTQ community in high school. I was really big on a very big advocate, which then eventually turned into like college and protests and all the things that I did there. But one day in our high school, a teacher decided to, on our morning announcements, filmed live, make a statement against LGBTQ people and quoted the Bible. Now, I went to a public school. I don't know if you know much about public school, but you are not allowed to talk about that in a public school, especially when you teach children who are LGBTQ. And this was a teacher that every student had to take her class just because of the position that she was in the class that she was in. I took massive offense to this, okay? At this point, I was 17 years old, maybe 18 years old. I don't even remember. I took massive offense to this. Myself and another teacher at my school, God rest his soul. Ugh, I still can't talk about him without getting emotional. Mr. Cause was probably one of the most amazing human beings I ever had the pleasure of meeting my entire life. He was a teacher who really believed in standing for your rights and making a statement. And he encouraged all of his students to do that on a daily basis. He was such an advocate for his kids. I will never forget that man. He and I decided that we were going to do something about that. And with the help of another one of my friends, Eddie Guerra, who may or may not see this video at some point in time, we broke into the film studio in a high school and we filmed a rebuttal video for this teacher and the statement, and I thought it was really well done and very respectful. And we asked the school to play it, and they refused to play the tape, and they were demanding that we turn over the tape, the rebuttal video that we made. We did not like that. So one day in the middle of school session, my teacher and I literally ran out the back doors of the school building and handed off that tape to an unmarked white van that worked for a news media station. I swear to God. And I stood the guard and he ran the tape out to the truck, and then we went back to class. It was, of course, during his class. And they broadcasted that in the major news media stations of what had happened at our school. Needless to say, fire and brimstone fell upon that school that day. Leonard Pitts wrote an article in response to that teacher's statement, I mean, news people were at our school. It absolutely blew up and put the spotlight on us in not a good way. But that was kind of our point, right? We wanted to keep it inside of the school and do something, and they didn't want to listen. So we got to get a little extreme. At the same time that was happening, I was interviewed by the Miami Herald about what happened, and by Mr. Caus's daughter, Liana, who was a peer of mine and was working at the Herald at the time as an intern. And she asked me, she said, they want to do this interview with you. Do you want to do it? And will you come out in the interview? And that was a very sensitive thing for me, because even though I was mostly out, my whole family didn't really know. And the Miami Herald is a huge paper. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna do it, because again, it's me. So, Indigo child, if you're not catching the drift. So I did. And the moment that hit the paper, the phone calls to my family, and I mean, I ended up not living in my home as a result of that movement for a while. I was sleeping in the living room floor of one of my partner's best friend's apartment because we didn't have a place to live. Literally, I was afraid to go home, and I was still going to school, and I was still, you know, going to work. I had a job. And I remember one day I got called down to the principal's office, and she interrogated me for over an hour about who handed off this tape to the news media station. And I was stone-faced. I was not about to say a damn word. I mean, I just looked at her. I sat in that chair, super stubborn, super defiant, super rebellious. I was just like, she's like, da, 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 da. Mind you, I was graduating number 7 out of 800 and something students. I had a GPA of 5.5. It was a weighted GPA. It was ridiculous. I was one of the top students. I was top 10 graduating that following year. And she was threatening me with suspension, and she was threatening me with like my scholarships to college and all this stuff, right? And she's talking. And then right at the end, when she's realizing she's not making a dent with me, she says to me, you know, we just want to make sure that you're okay and like your mental health, right? She jumps on that boat. And I looked at her and I was like, if you really cared about my mental health, you'd be asking me where I've been sleeping for the past week, because it hasn't been at home. And I genuinely don't think you give a crap about my mental health. I think you're terrified that you're going to be exploited for being a horrible principal. That's what I think. And I'm not going to tell you who gave that tape, and it'll go down with the ship. So you're wasting your time, was my response to her. She didn't like that, because she said that the reason she didn't want to play the tape was because it was interrupting FCAT. Okay. So what? Doesn't make any sense. So anyways, she then sends me to my counselor, who I loved. Bless Miss Villavicencio's heart. She was such an angel. And my counselor looks at me and she goes, girl, why? And I was like, because it's not right. It's not right. And I had to make a statement. And she was like, oh my God, we've worked so hard to get you into this college, and we've worked so hard for your career. She was my teacher in middle school. She'd known me for a long time. And I was like, it doesn't matter, Ms. V. It doesn't matter. This wasn't right. And all I wanted was to say my piece. And she denied that. So that's what happens. That's what happens, right? Y'all, I cannot tell you how scared I was. I was an 18-year-old kid. My family did not have my back. I was like thinking I was gonna have to be on the streets for God knows how long because of all this. The day that newspaper went into print, I thought I was gonna vomit. I was shaking going to class. I was so scared. But Mr. Cause always had my back, and he was always like, I will back you up 100%. Like, and if you don't have a place to stay, you can come stay at our place. Like, he never withheld support, which was so invaluable to me at that point in time. And long story short, they made me see an out of the community counselor for every week until I graduated in order to give me my diploma. They wouldn't allow me to graduate from high school unless I agreed to see this Jewish community counselor every week at a certain hour and tell him about my mental health issues. That was the clause that they put in for my graduation. And of course I did it. And of course I had nothing to share because I explained to him why I did it, and he thought it was hilarious, frankly. So I would just meet up once a week with this older gay dude and just talk about nothing, because There was nothing to talk about. He knew why I had been put in that position. Like, he got it, you know, which was, I mean, he was a nice person and there's nothing really to say about that, but that was how I got to graduate high school. And that's how I almost didn't. That's how I almost didn't, even with all of my credentials and all the hard work that I put in. And that story is a classic example of an indigo child. That story is a classic example of someone who sees injustice and wants to verbally, vocally create justice. As someone who sees an opportunity for education and growth and equality and takes the reins and creates that experience, okay? So if in listening to my story, you're having a flashback like, oh, I remember when I did that protest, or I did that sit-in, or I did that thing, then you probably are also an indigo child. And so during right now, you are probably one of the people that are so hungry to share information and wake people up, and you're like red pilling people left and right, because it's in your energetic DNA and it's in your physical DNA. It's in both, okay? Really important that you know that. That's why that's happening. I will say though, to have something in place like a form of digital consent so that you're not blasting people with stuff that is honestly really hard to watch. A lot of the links that are being shared in My Through Education are really intense. I mean, we're going into topics of mind control and abuses and things that are crazy. And a lot of people are not really there yet to be able to see that and study it and see it as an opportunity to learn. They see it as like an assault to their energetic body. So just be mindful of what you share. Give a heads up before you share it. Like, hey, this might not be appropriate if you're really struggling with the energy right now. Give your audience an opportunity to choose the red pill. Don't just shove it down their throats, because in my experience, that creates more trauma and more harm energetically. So have a system in place. You can do a thread like I do, whatever, you know, just have a system in place. Know that people can go to you for information and they can learn from you. But most importantly, we need the indigo children right now. We desperately need you guys to use your voice and be the anchor you came here to be. You incarnated for right now. I want you to understand that, and I want you to hear it from me. You incarnated for right now. You incarnated for this precise moment in time, so that your skill set, and if you think about your past, you'll probably see all the things you've spent all this time learning and studying and paying attention to is now coming to a point where it's very, very practical and applicable and useful to right now, okay? So you're here for this moment, you're here for this movement. So lend your voice in a way that feels good to you and that feels empowering to you. And also at the same time, have a system in place for digital consent so that you're not overwhelming everybody's circuits, but that you are a steady resource of information. Cool? Hi, everybody that hopped on. Are there any questions for me about this? I don't see any questions in the feed. Everybody's just like watching. I see the numbers of people watching, but like no one's asking anything. So I'm like, either people are really freaked out about what I just shared, or they're just like mesmerized by this whole indigo child story. So any questions? Hi, Jenna. Hi, Danielle. Welcome to the feed. Hi, Kaylee. Hi, Tanya. Hi, Adelina. Margaret. What's up, y'all? What is up? Okay, I don't see any questions, so that's probably made it real clear. So again, thank you again to my patrons. Yeah. I'm the first one you said, and my kid is so indigo. Yeah, so you're more crystalline energy, more, yeah. And your kid is probably really indigo. Yeah, I'm super indigo, and I've known that about myself forever. I'm like hardcore. And energetically, indigos can be abrasive to other people because you're so strong in what you know and what you know that you know that you know, and there's no like backing down. So people come in contact with an indigo person and you're like, whoa, this is like a powerhouse. It's like you get volted, you know. So whereas the crystallines are very much more like, their work is very energetic. They're very significant to the planet, but it's very, very energetic. It's not like the warrior type of personality. It's different. Yeah. Isn't it crazy, Misty, to see other people have similar? It's just wild. It's wild. But we are all needed. Every frequency, every type of person is needed on the planet right now for a different job. The Indigos are the frontliners. They are the ones who have the mouthpiece, and they are the red pilling people. The crystalline and the rainbow, I feel like their work is way more energetic, and they're doing it in different ways, right? We all have a role, and it's important that we take it up and do it. But I really wanted to give a shout out to the Indigo children, because they really are, they're being shadow banned left and right on every platform. Every platform is shutting down their voice and trying to silence them and trying to make them not be heard and not be seen. It's very real. So they are taking the brunt end of this right now. And I just wanted to make an honor video to them and to thank them. Thank you, Indigo children, for holding the line. Because if it wasn't for the Indigo kids holding the line, we would not be aware of what's even happening right now. So this, this is a tribute to all of us who are doing that work. It's not easy work. It's scary and it's really overwhelming. So, I think we deserve a little bit of a shout out. All right. Thank you again to my patrons. Some of you are on right now. I love you so much. Thank you for allowing me and blessing me with your patronage so I can keep doing these kinds of videos and this kinds of work. It's a huge honor and it's a huge blessing that I can even bring this to you guys. Again, I will include the Patreon link above if you would like to join us. And I also share a lot of behind the scenes. For example, I'll take a snapshot of this and put it on my Patreon for all my patrons to see. So you guys get a lot of my handwritten notes and a lot of my behind the scenes thoughts and stuff on there as well, which I think is pretty cool. All right, my friends, have an amazing one.